rematch of a rematch of a rematch of a rematch this year in the NBA Finals. No one was very surprised that it ended in a sweep, considering how much talent the Warriors had compared to the Cavs. But something very interesting happened both on the court and behind the scenes that forever altered the history of this series. We all remember the controversial replay and reversal of this call, turning a charge by Durant into a blocking foul on LeBron. The call ultimately ended up being right, but whether they should have reviewed it in the first place was certainly something worth arguing. And then there was the all-time biggest brain cramp ever committed in the finals by one Earl Smith III. It was natural for LeBron to be upset. They missed a chance to take the first game on the road and dramatically change the course of the series. But rather than look at this positively, like, hey guys, we are so close, just one or two plays and we're right there, he went nuclear by slamming his fist into a whiteboard, causing a contusion so severe that the first MRI couldn't tell them anything because his hand was so swollen. Of course, LeBron went on to have an incredible series anyway, keeping this news so quiet it wasn't even whispered about until just before Game 4, and then only revealed once they were swept and LeBron had a light cast on during his post-game press conference.
You know, I let the emotions get the best of me and pretty much played the last 3 games with a broken hand, so that's what it is.
Bad to the ball.
I mean, look at these stats, and you tell me if his hand bothered him at all. It's hard to fathom he'd have been any more effective than this, and I felt compelled to go through every second, every frame, to see if there was any evidence his hand was an issue for him. It was also a fascinating exercise to watch 3 straight games while isolating just on LeBron. It's something you should try, even if for just a few minutes during a game, as it provides another level of insight into the player's game that you wouldn't normally have. First off, you can see clearly how swollen it was in Game 2. You can't see the tendons on the top of his hand or the outline of his knuckles, so his hand is injured, plain and simple.
Bad to the ball.
With this amount of swelling, it's a pretty severe injury at that. And I'm not here to even remotely argue that he made up the injury to save face or whatever. I just wanted to see if there was any evidence to suggest the hand got in the way of his performance on the court. But this was a tough one. What exactly am I looking for? Is it wincing in pain when he high-fives a teammate? Or is he trying not to use his right hand to give someone 5? We saw plenty of instances of both in this series, and the only time he seemed to completely shy away from offering his right hand out was at the very end of Game 4, as he was leaving the court for the final time, exhibiting a lot of class by acknowledging his Warriors opponents as well. But after the game, we saw him dapping these kids with that hand with no visible reaction. And what about before Game 2? Wouldn't push-ups be a problem with a hand so severely injured? I have to imagine they used all manner of painkillers to treat his hand, so I bet the hand was pretty numb and didn't send many pain signals to his brain. I also noticed a few times where he was able to palm the ball in that hand, which is remarkable since it requires quite a bit of strength, and then he was able to flick the ball after palming it, something I don't think he'd be able to do if the hand was hurting him a lot. Passing would certainly be affected by contusion of the metacarpal bone, so I studied every pass he made to see if he was favoring it, or if it caused inaccurate passes, or if there was any less zip on the ball. He seemed to be able to make whatever pass he wanted, whether it was a flick pass with that wrist, requiring tons of strength to propel the ball this fast, and again, with no noticeable signs of the hand being in any pain, or throwing a baseball pass or 2. These all had lots of force, or his customary whip passes across the court to open shooters. All these seem to be at his disposal at any time. I would think there's a ton of stress on the hand when throwing his normal wraparound passes, but he threw just about all of these with a normal zing and without any kind of outward indication that that motion was painful. He did go out of his way on a few passes to throw them somewhat awkwardly with the left hand, so I got to wondering if there were certain moments of the game where it hurt more than others, and this was his way of protecting the limb. But it's clear LeBron is so good, he can throw passes with whatever hand and be crazy effective. But then a few passes would go awry, and I had to wonder, was it the hand? Or just a normal errant pass that happens multiple times a game to every player who dominates the ball as much as LeBron does? One stat that seems to indicate something is how he stopped shooting three-point shots. But having gone through all this footage, I have to say there weren't a lot of instances where he would pass up open threes, and based on his attempts in games 2 and 3, there was no drop-off in his normal amount of attempts. One stat that caught my eye was that he only took one three-pointer in the first halves of the whole series, and that was in Game 1. After the injury, it's possible you could argue he waited to shoot until the second half for some odd reason, but that he was a substandard 30% in Games 2 and 3. So, there's definitely something there, but not to the extent where he simply could not make a three if his life depended on it. And if you're looking to master ways to score out of any offense, then I've got a free video for you. Just click on the link in the description below and I'll show you how to get open from 3 and utilize good footwork to knock down the shot. There was a stretch in Game 3 where he did not look good on offense at all. And I couldn't seem to find an incident where he had banged his right hand before this, but who knows? These are the questions that kept popping up with every shot he missed badly. And at the rim, he seemed to have zero problems getting his shot off with all manner of accuracy, and most importantly, touch. The ball seemed to release just like it always had, and on many of these makes, the degree of difficulty was quite high, and even harder to do if he had severe pain just from moving it. There were a number of lefty layups, but these could easily have been his normal preference, based on where the defense was and where the help was coming from. So who can say that any of these in particular were shot lefty because he was in too much pain to release them with the right hand? You could definitely see that he didn't quite offer the same ferocity on his dunks that we've grown accustomed to, opting for more of a soft dunk that wouldn't collapse the rim, enough to give the crowd what they wanted, but just enough finesse to protect him from screaming out in pain. But how about this play, where the whistle blew and he dunked it anyway? Seemed like a good place to not go out of his way to put his hand at risk on this meaningless dunk. Or how about when he wiped the bottom of his shoes multiple times throughout the series? I don't know, I would think at the very least he would use his left hand to do this, and yet you can see he wiped both feet with that right hand and didn't even seem to react.
Bad to the ball. Bad. Bad to the ball.
This is definitely a man who appeared to not feel any pain in that hand despite the injury and swelling. Of all the footage I went through, I was able to find only one glimpse of potential pain in that hand. After Game 2, under the bleachers and far from the eyes of anyone in the arena, while trying to take off a rubber band from his right wrist, here was a grimace that indicated that his hand hurt. And maybe in Game 4, after a tough and one, he shakes his hand a little. But that, sports fans, was it. The problem with this video is that it opened up a huge can of worms, as the questions began to outnumber the answers. I started looking at his defense to wonder if he was avoiding using the right hand to get in the passing lanes or to contest shots, and there was a little evidence of this, maybe? But then he'd swipe hard with that right hand, and while it might not have made contact, he certainly seemed willing to put it in harm's way in an attempt to get a steal or force a miss. And what about all the times his hand got banged around? I found a bunch of instances where he put a lot of pressure on that hand. Sometimes contact was made right on that hand by other players, and again, not even a flinch. Which is interesting to me, since he's normally not shy about displaying pain, whether it's severe or relatively minor. So I have to imagine this meant his hand simply did not hurt.
Bad to the ball.
Either because in this particular instance, he completely blocked it out, or by the miracle of modern medical science, the pain was blocked out for him. Either way, his performance in the finals was still worthy of awe. His Game 1 gem might have been the best all-around offensive performance ever in the finals. But the other games weren't horribly far behind. Did he stop shooting threes in Game 4 because of his hand? Or did he simply realize the desperate situation and knew that driving to the hole was the best way to keep his team in the game? Like I said earlier, this question has spawned a lot more questions than answers. And even though in the end, the outcome would not have mattered, when 2 of the 4 games came down to a play or two, it's fascinating to consider, what if? Sports fans, make sure to hit the subscribe button and adjust your settings so you can get notified immediately when we drop another great NBA video. Let us know how you feel with a thumbs up and a comment. After all, at BBallBreakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in?